The teenage mother who raised the man who built Amazon. The life of Jeff Bezos and the extraordinary struggle of his mother. Jeff Bezos was born Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen on January 12, 1964, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But the circumstances surrounding his birth were anything but comfortable. His mother, Jackie Jies, was only 17 years old and still a high school student. In America in 1964, being a pregnant teenager carried enormous social stigma. Jackie later recalled the difficulties she faced, and Jeff himself told the U.S. Congress what happened to his mother. When Jackie became pregnant, her school initially tried to prevent her from continuing her education. Her father fought for her. Eventually, the school agreed to let Jackie stay, but under humiliating restrictions. She could not participate in extracurricular activities, she was not given a locker, and although she finished high school, she was not allowed to walk across the stage with her classmates to receive her diploma. Imagine being 17 years old, carrying a baby, knowing other students were graduating normally while you were being treated as though you had done something shameful. Yet Jackie refused to abandon her education. After Jeff was born, she enrolled in night classes. But she had another problem: who would take care of her baby while she attended school? So she deliberately chose professors who would allow her to bring Jeff into the classroom. Jeff later described his mother arriving at class carrying 2 large bags, one containing her textbooks and another containing diapers, bottles, and things to keep baby Jeff occupied while she studied. A teenage mother sitting in a classroom at night. A textbook open in front of her. A baby beside her. Other students studying quietly while she tries to build a future for both of them. Her young marriage falls apart. Jackie had married Jeff's biological father, Ted Jorgensen, while they were both extremely young. But the marriage did not survive. By the time Jeff was around 2 years old, his parents had separated, leaving Jackie to rebuild her life with her small child. She worked and cared for Jeff while trying to continue her education. Later, while working at a bank, she met a young man named Mike Bezos. Mike's story was remarkable too. He had come to the United States from Cuba at only 16, after Fidel Castro came to power. He arrived without his parents and spoke little English. He eventually received a college scholarship in Albuquerque. Jackie and Mike married when Jeff was about 4. Mike legally adopted the little boy. Jeff's surname changed from Jorgensen to Bezos. And Jeff has made clear that Mike was not merely a stepfather to him. He regarded him as his father. There is another remarkable twist. Jeff's biological father eventually lost contact with him. Decades later, journalist Brad Stone located Ted Jorgensen while researching Bezos. According to CNN's account, Jorgensen did not initially realize that the famous billionaire named Jeff Bezos was the son he had fathered as a teenager. The curious little boy. Jeff was extremely curious from childhood. From roughly ages 4 through 16, he regularly spent summers on his grandparents' ranch in Texas. His grandfather repaired machinery himself and taught Jeff that when something broke, you did not simply give up, you figured out how to fix it. Jeff began inventing things as a boy. He experimented with homemade devices, including alarms and other small inventions. Those summers helped develop the self-reliance that would later become part of his entrepreneurial personality. He became an outstanding student and eventually attended Princeton University, graduating in 1986 with high honors in electrical engineering and computer science. After Princeton, Bezos entered finance and technology. He worked at Bankers Trust and later at the investment firm D.E. Shaw, where he had a successful and well-paid career. In other words, by his late 20s, Jeff Bezos did not need to take a huge risk. He already had the kind of career many people would spend their entire lives trying to obtain. Then he saw something that changed his life. The idea nobody could guarantee would work. In 1994, Bezos became fascinated by the extraordinary growth of the internet. He began thinking about creating an online bookstore capable of offering millions of titles, something a physical bookstore could never stock. He told his boss he was considering quitting. His boss reportedly told him that the idea sounded good, but that it might make more sense for somebody who didn't already have such a good job. Bezos thought about it. Then he walked away from security. He and his then-wife Mackenzie moved west, and in 1994 he founded Amazon. The company began operating from a modest setup in his Bellevue, Washington, home, and Amazon's online bookstore opened in July 1995. The mother who gambled her savings on her son. When Jeff needed money to build Amazon, Jackie and Mike Bezos became crucial early supporters. Jeff later testified that much of Amazon's initial startup capital came from his parents. They invested a large portion of their life savings in an idea they did not really understand. Jeff warned them that he believed there was about a 70% chance they could lose their investment. They invested anyway. Jeff explained that his parents were not really betting on the internet or even on an online bookstore. They were betting on their son. Think about the emotional circle in this story. The 17-year-old girl who once struggled to attend night school while carrying diapers for baby Jeff was now risking the money she had accumulated over decades on that same child's dream. And even Amazon's success was far from guaranteed. From its founding through the end of 2001, Amazon accumulated nearly $3 billion in losses, and it did not post its first profitable quarter until the fourth quarter of 2001. Critics repeatedly predicted the company would fail. It didn't. Amazon eventually grew from an online bookstore into one of the world's largest technology and commerce companies. Bezos later founded Blue Origin, became the owner of the Washington Post, and today serves as Amazon's executive chair. Jackie Bezos finally had a very different life. Jackie's early struggle did not define the rest of her life. She and Mike remained together for decades. They raised Jeff and his siblings, and Jackie later became deeply involved in education and philanthropy. Together, Jackie and Mike helped create the Bezos Family Foundation, concentrating especially on opportunities for children and young people. The foundation says her work eventually reached millions of young people and families through educational initiatives. Perhaps that makes sense. A woman who had once been made to feel unwelcome in a school became someone who spent the later part of her life helping other children obtain opportunities to learn. But there was one final heartbreaking chapter. In 2020, Jackie was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, a progressive neurological disease. She lived with the illness for several years. Jackie Bezos died in August 2025 at age 78, surrounded by members of her family. Jeff's tribute to her emphasized something that runs through their entire story. She became a mother extraordinarily young, but devoted her life to loving and protecting her family. Before there was Amazon, before the billions, before the rockets and giant warehouses, there was a 17-year-old girl carrying a baby and 2 bags into a night school classroom. She had very little money. She had no guarantee that her education would lead anywhere. She had no idea what her baby would become. 30 years later, when that boy asked her to risk her savings on a strange idea called an online bookstore, she believed in him once again. Amazon may have been Jeff Bezos's idea. But long before Amazon existed, Jackie Bezos had already made the first investment in Jeff Bezos. She refused to give up on him. He did not become rich because Amazon immediately made huge profits. His strategy was almost the opposite: grow first, reinvest aggressively, dominate the market, and accept years of very small profits or losses. When did Jeff Bezos actually become rich? Bezos founded Amazon in 1994, and the website began selling books in 1995. The major turning point came when Amazon went public in May 1997. After the IPO, Bezos still owned roughly 41% of Amazon, so as the stock price rose, his personal wealth rose very rapidly. By 1998, only about 4 years after starting Amazon, Bezos appeared on the Forbes 400 with an estimated fortune of about $1.6 billion. So he became a billionaire at around age 34. Importantly, that did not mean he had $1.6 billion sitting in a bank account. Most of his fortune was the value of the Amazon shares he owned. The strategies that made Amazon enormous. 1. He deliberately started with books. Bezos did not initially try to sell everything. He reportedly studied different products that could be sold through the rapidly growing internet and chose books because there were millions of different titles. A normal bookstore could carry only a fraction of them, but an online bookstore could theoretically offer an enormous selection. That gave Amazon a simple early promise. More books than any physical bookstore could possibly hold. Once customers became comfortable buying books online, Bezos could expand into other categories. That was a crucial strategy: start narrow, become very good at one thing, then expand. 2. Growth mattered more to him than immediate profit. This was probably his most controversial strategy. Many traditional businesses think, buy something for $10, sell it for $15, make your profit. Bezos was thinking much further ahead. Amazon would earn money and then spend enormous amounts on technology, warehouses, employees, advertising, new product categories, international expansion, faster delivery. Amazon's own numbers show how fast he pushed growth. Sales jumped from about $15.7 million in 1996 to $147.8 million in 1997, an increase of roughly 838%. Rather than saying, "Now we are successful, let's take the money," Bezos essentially kept saying, "Make Amazon bigger." This continued for years. 3. His famous philosophy was, think long-term. In his first shareholder letter, Bezos made it clear that Amazon would make decisions based on long-term market leadership rather than short-term profits. That meant he was willing to look bad temporarily. Wall Street might ask, where are the profits? Bezos was asking, how many customers will we have 5 or 10 years from now? This is one reason Amazon survived long enough to become dominant. 4. He was obsessed with customers rather than competitors. One of Bezos's most famous business principles became customer obsession. His reasoning was interesting. Competitors can stop doing something. Customers almost never stop wanting lower prices, more choices, faster delivery, greater convenience. Therefore, instead of constantly asking, "What is Walmart doing?" or "What is Barnes & Noble doing?" Amazon tried to ask, what would make this easier for the customer? Amazon's 1997 numbers were already showing the effect. Repeat customers made up more than 58% of fourth-quarter orders, up from over 46% a year earlier. 5. He used low prices as a weapon. Bezos understood something extremely important about internet commerce. A customer could compare prices easily. Therefore, Amazon repeatedly tried to offer competitive or lower prices, even if that reduced the amount of profit earned on each individual sale. His philosophy was roughly, lower prices, more customers, more sales, lower costs per item, even lower prices. That becomes a cycle. Bezos later called this kind of idea a flywheel. Imagine pushing a huge wheel. At first it barely moves. But you continue pushing. Eventually the wheel develops momentum, and now every part of the business helps another part. For Amazon, lower prices, more customers, more sellers, greater selection, better customer experience, more customers. That became one of Amazon's greatest competitive advantages. 6. Then he stopped thinking of Amazon as a bookstore. This was another brilliant decision. Amazon's name was not Jeff's online bookstore. Bezos had a much bigger ambition. Books were simply the entrance. Amazon expanded into music, electronics, toys, clothing, household products, appliances, groceries, almost everything else. This eventually fulfilled his idea of creating an everything store. That is when Amazon became much harder for competitors to fight. A customer who originally visited once a year to buy a book could eventually visit several times a week. 7. Then he let his competitors sell inside Amazon. This was a very unusual move. Instead of Amazon selling every product itself, Bezos allowed outside merchants to sell products through Amazon Marketplace. Amazon could therefore offer millions more products without purchasing all of that inventory itself. Marketplace grew extremely quickly. By the fourth quarter of 2001, marketplace orders already accounted for approximately 15% of Amazon's US orders. Amazon could collect fees from these sellers while expanding its selection. This became an enormous business. 8. Prime was designed to change people's psychology. In 2005, Amazon launched Amazon Prime. Customers paid an annual membership fee and received rapid shipping on eligible purchases. This was psychologically powerful. Before Prime, a customer might think, "Do I really want to pay shipping for this $12 item?" After paying for Prime, the thinking became, "Shipping is already included. I'll just order it from Amazon." That encouraged customers to buy more frequently. Instead of Amazon being a website people occasionally visited, it started becoming a default shopping destination. 9. Warehouses became another weapon. Bezos realized that an online store wasn't really just a website. Behind the website needed to be an enormous physical machine. Amazon invested billions in fulfillment centers, warehouses, software, and eventually delivery infrastructure. This was expensive. But once those facilities existed, a smaller competitor faced a terrible problem. They could build a nice website relatively easily. They could not easily reproduce Amazon's logistics network. In 2006, Amazon also introduced Fulfillment by Amazon, allowing independent sellers to place inventory in Amazon's fulfillment system and have Amazon pick, pack and ship their products. Now Amazon wasn't merely a retailer. It was becoming infrastructure for other retailers. And then came perhaps Bezos's smartest business decision, AWS. One of Amazon's most important businesses eventually had very little to do with selling packages. While building Amazon, the company had developed enormous computing infrastructure. Bezos and his executives realized that other companies had exactly the same problem. They needed servers, databases, and computing capacity. Instead of every company buying and maintaining its own servers, Amazon could rent computing power to them. That became Amazon Web Services, AWS. Today we call it cloud computing. This was extraordinary strategically because Amazon transformed something it originally needed for itself into something it could sell to thousands of other businesses. Companies could essentially say, "Amazon, give us computing power when we need it." AWS eventually became one of Amazon's most important profit engines. But there is a surprising part of the story. Bezos became a billionaire in 1998. Yet Amazon itself was still losing money. During the dot-com crash around 2000, 2001, Amazon's stock collapsed dramatically and many internet companies disappeared completely. People genuinely wondered whether Amazon would survive. Amazon finally reported its first quarterly profit in the fourth quarter of 2001. So consider the strange situation. 1994, starts Amazon. 1995, begins selling books. 1997, Amazon goes public. 1998, Bezos becomes a billionaire. 2000, 2001, Amazon faces a serious survival test. 2001, Amazon records its first quarterly profit. He became extremely wealthy before Amazon became consistently profitable, because investors believed the company could become enormously valuable in the future. And Bezos mostly kept his ownership. This is another major reason he became extraordinarily wealthy. A founder can create a successful company and still miss most of the future fortune if he sells too much ownership early. Bezos maintained a very large Amazon stake. At the IPO, he still controlled roughly 41% of the company's shares. Therefore, when Amazon became worth $10 billion, $100 billion, $500 billion, and eventually more than $1 trillion, the value of his remaining shares exploded. In 2017, Bezos eventually became the world's richest person. And in 2020, Forbes estimated that he became the first person ever worth more than $200 billion. At that time, Amazon shares represented more than 90% of his fortune. The deeper lesson in Bezos's strategy. His greatest strategy was probably not simply selling books online. It was this sequence. Find a rapidly growing market, enter through one simple product, acquire customers, sacrifice short-term profit, reinvest heavily, build infrastructure. Competitors cannot easily copy, expand into adjacent businesses, keep ownership. Think decades rather than quarters.